More medications, less health. Something's broken. Traditional medicine manages symptoms, but true healing addresses root cause. I'm Josh Rimini, pharmacist turned healer. At Beyond the Pills, we merge ancient wisdom with modern day science to inspire you through stories of transformation, practical trainings, and holistic healing. Join me and other practitioners as we guide you towards vibrant health, body, mind, and spirit, and move beyond symptom management into true healing. Oh, welcome to this episode of Beyond the Pills. This one's going to be a really good one, guys. Welcome back. This is the journey through the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science to really uncover what it truly means to heal body, mind, and spirit. So today matches that vibe for sure. Today's guest is someone who embodies this mission in every way. Chip Paul is not only a wellness innovator and an endocannabinoid system expert. We're going to talk a lot about that. He's a man on a divine mission to remind us that nature already holds the cures we seek. Ooh, I love that. As the founder of TrueMedX and Neighborly Wellness and the host of Chip Talks Health, Chip is leading a movement to reclaim health sovereignty by decoding in the human operating system itself, the ECS. A Tulsa Man of the Year, ordained minister, and tireless health advocate, Chip believes that knowledge to heal has always been within us, and it's time to remind and to remember. So get ready for a soul-stirring and science-rich conversation about healing, health, freedom, and how we can return to the blueprint of nature. Chip, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for that intro. It was great. Very well done.
Well, I love reading them and I love working on them. And because it does truly show the essence of, I was talking about this in another episode recently where I read someone's bio and they were like, or the intro, and they're like, wow, when I hear it to my own self, it's like there's this power that comes from it because we speak our truth. We speak all those things you do when you do what you do, right? But hearing it and coming back in and like absorbing that is I think is also powerful. So let's get into it. We've got a lot going on. I've been a student of and gone on the deep dives on the endocannabinoid system for a long time. It's obviously front and center with medical marijuana and all these things that are going on. So, but your background is unique as your mission is. And so let's talk about your pathway and advocacy in the ECS research and how you kind of led you down that path. Because I think people, they get that backstory, then we can dive into a little bit of the other stuff. So let's just start with, hey, who are you and how the heck did you get here?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So let's say I'm a mathematician by training, and I have always been a why guy. So I've always, wanted to dive in and figure things out, and had some experience with free energy, which was really interesting back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I've always been, somebody who's going to dive in and try to understand a topic, and frequency has always been something that's been super interesting to me almost all my life. But in 2013, my wife and I were teetotalers, complete teetotalers. We didn't drink alcohol. We didn't smoke marijuana. We didn't, I'd take Advil, but that was about it if my back hurt. But we both were in a lot of pain, and I had a lot of back pain. She was a 2-level spinal fusion patient, so she had a lot of pain. And we knew that something, was in our future as far as just pain management and pain relief. And we decided, and it was not just a flip decision. It was a very intentional and thoughtful decision to, I say drive to Colorado and get medical marijuana and try it. But I think I can now say we actually bought some on the black market here in Oklahoma and tried it before we made it legal. But that started a whole journey, and that worked, and it worked in a way that fascinated me. And so that kind of piqued my why. And I began to dive in and study why medical marijuana worked. And it works because it impacts something called the endocannabinoid system. But past that, really, the endocannabinoid system needs to be divorced from medical marijuana. But interestingly, medical marijuana is a way to, let's say, impact the system and can kind of, if you know what you're doing, can impact the system all across a continuum or spectrum. And that is, a useful tool, let's say. And I think marijuana will be part of our, pharmacopoeia, in the future and all that. But it really needs to be divorced from the endocannabinoid system. And I see this all the time when I speak. Like I'll, Chip, come talk about the endocannabinoid system. And as soon as I say endocannabinoid, I have to pull people back from this, cannabis bias and all this. So it really, it's our master regulatory system, the endocannabinoid system. It's common to everything with a spine. In fact, we sort of developed it, let's say, ancestrally in the actual organism where we developed a spine. That's the first place kind of an rough endocannabinoid system showed up. It's prevalent down to not only every cell has a hook for the endocannabinoid system, but every organelle in every cell has a hook for the endocannabinoid system and would have to, if it's our master regulatory system. So it is the therapeutic target of the future. It is absolutely, something that every scientist, researcher, pharmacist, doctor, physician, nutritionalist should be aware of and should intimately know. It is that important.
Yes. And I think when we started, because I'm in North Carolina, nothing's legal here, but hemp is. And I want to talk about now how people are kind of moving towards hemp and not this. And it's another phase to this whole process. And I think when we were talking offline, you really sparked my interest, because I think people think we go to cannabis to affect the system rather than the system is affected by cannabis. And like what you're saying, it is this master regulatory system. And because of that, the way I look functionally, and I'm a why guy too. Like that's why I do what I do, because I've always asked the question, why? Like how many whys can I get to the place where I really feel satisfied? So you've gone on this deep dive of this ECS endocannabinoid system, and you call it the master regulatory system. But give people a little insight to that, because when we're talking functionally, I think this is really important, because we're going to talk about how we can influence it today in different ways, body, mind, and spirit, because it is this master system. And that master system is very new to our scientific mind and our scientific world, even though it's been there forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And talk to people, because when I hear root cause or affecting the master systems, if you will, like the grid, if in power grid, right? And you don't affect the power pole. If you affect the grid, you're going to get there because you're going way upstream to all those downstream effects that we have in our health. And if it's attached to this central core of our being, our spinal system and our energy systems, then when we affect that in a positive way, it seems as though when we turn on these master regulators, right, on or off the good ways with this system and how we can modify it, it seems like that's why we're getting all the good results. Because when you look at even CBD, not even just the non-psychoactive cannabinoids, there's like 40 or 50 indications of use now for these specific things. So I want you to speak to that as the expert in the room. Why this master regulatory system, and what kind of plays in and how we can use it.
Yeah, yeah. And real quick, just a quick analogy and point about what you were just saying. So if you look at, semi-glutides are a big deal right now, and semi-glutides have a very high risk profile. I mean, there's, a lot of danger, let's say, associated with using semi-glutides. But what they're trying to do, their mechanism of action, is to try to get cells to express GLP-1 and GIP and peptide YY and all these satiety molecules. What turns out, if you just pop up and function, there's an endocannabinoid neuroreceptor that controls all of that and is a far better target, safer, less risk, and way more efficacious to be able to control all that. It's called GPR 120. But let me talk about kind of what the endocannabinoid system is, and I think
Please.
let me give this description of it, and then I also want to talk about how to impact it, how we normally impact it, or how your dog impacts it, or your cat, or your bird, or fish, or whatever, because I think that's also really important. But here's what happens with the endocannabinoid system. So cells, all right, cells are like little individual people, okay, and they can be happy and satisfied and kind of want to participate as part of a collective. So if I'm a heart cell, I'm going to want to join with other heart cells and kind of build a heart. That's what I'm all about. But I'm not going to do that if I'm not in a good environment, right? I'm going to protect myself under certain situations. And so basically, how a cell begins to say, hey, I want to be a part of the bigger picture. I want to be a part of the social system. They literally pop up a CB1 neuroreceptor. And that says, okay, I want to play. I want to be a part of the bigger system. I want to understand what everything's going, what everything is happening in the body. I want to be a systemic player in this big system. Okay. And they do that with the endocannabinoid system. All right. So cells will literally express endocannabinoid receptors when they're wanting to be social and wanting to play and wanting to be regulated by the big master system. Now, interestingly, what happens under inflammation and oxidative stress and things like that, our cells feel threatened. They feel threatened by the environment, and that might be a environmental thing, that might be an infection, that might be a drug, that might be a lot of different things, but they feel threatened. And when they feel threatened, they literally begin to pull in their CB1 neuroreceptors and say, yeah, it's too noisy and staticky out there. I don't think I want to play anymore. I think I want to just go back to being an individual. And cancer would be the absolute extreme of that, where a cell just completely, loses its way. But does that kind of make sense as a, master regulatory system and how it works?
Yeah, well, I love how we can break it down. I always like it this way, is like you can take it as a microscope or a telescope, right? When you bring it down to the microscopic level, the tiny level of the cell and the organelle, and having every cell has a receptor. And when you're talking receptor, it's just lock and key. There's a signal, it grabs it, and then it's something, this. And I want to touch on the frequency side of that when we go down the hole a little bit, because
Yeah.
I've been a real been student of everything with frequency too. And so it's really, to me, it's like, yeah, our cells want to work together. If they don't work together, we don't have a system, right? It's just, we don't live with each individual, but each cell has to have its own survival mechanism, or else it doesn't survive, right? This is
Right.
nature, it's nature. And so it makes sense though, like when it's kind of just like the microscope, but then I was thinking like, it's just the way people are, right? It's the way we are as a species. Like if I'm not safe, I don't have food and shelter and clothes on my back, I'm not going to be thinking about how I can help other people and do all these other things, because I'm going to contract, right? We all know this. So it's like if the cell is in fight or flight, it's just going to turn in and go like, all right, I'm going to wait until everything's good, and then I'm going to be okay. And if everything's okay and I'm in rest and digest and, healing, well, that's the time to open up and be vulnerable, right? And allow us to do that. So I love that you brought that down to the tiny level, because I think we all can really understand how that kind of works. And this system is what you're saying is that upstream regulatory component where it basically tells the system or the cell like safe or not safe, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's also like if you think of in your body, and back to the frequency analogy, but this is actually true. This actually happens. But your body's like a symphony, right? Your
Yeah.
body's like a
Yeah.
giant
It's
symphony.
all the time.
And you have to have a conductor. And that conductor, though, also has to be, sensitive, let's say, to environment, because you have to make changes. And, what's environment? Diet is environment. Environmental stimulus is environment, right? But that conductor has to be sensitive to those things because, again, the conditions change inside of you, right? The tubas can't play the way that they need to play if they don't have the right dietary fats. The horn section can't work right if the immune system is all whacked out. And so he has to conduct, but he has to also conduct around all of these variables. And so you can think of the endocannabinoid system as the conductor. Hypothalamus hippocampus is, the computer, let's say, in our vehicle, and that's where everything originates from. But, we have to have a sensor array and we have to have a mechanism of action. And that's what the endocannabinoid system is.
That's a really great space for that. And looking at it from that perspective and influencing it in ways, so like in that way, just thinking about the endocannabinoid system in holding this key to unlocking healing, right? Unlocking homeostasis or hormesis, or the way that the body is in, I don't say balance, but balancing. This is a balancing thing, right? And I love where I've been talking about environmental well-being for a long time. So I'm glad you bringing this up, because it's not like you can just influence and say everything's fine, because if all these other signals are off, like you're eating crappy, you're stressed out, all the environmental factors, whether it's information environment, food environment, like it's all pretty toxic these days. And we have to like really do a lot of other things. But, in your experience, like you've gone down this deep dive in many different ways, by the way, not just the physiological way. Um, you know, what are some surprising or maybe overlooked ways the ECS system connects to things like gut health or emotional regulation or even chronic disease that you found? Because I think this is where we get into like, okay, we know what it is, where it's at, we're aware. And and I also want to talk about how in the heck did you get to here? Because we don't have a lot of science documented from this, right? You had to go find it in different places, and you've created a lot of this science with the top level people in the world. That's what I'm saying. And we're talking to like the ECS guy, like, and that was kind of my experience going in this, because people were asking about CBD and marijuana, and I'm like, I got to figure this out. And then I went into the why and like, how do I learn more? And I think George Washington University and some of those places were doing some little things, but it wasn't much. And I know that you've been like the creator of a lot of this, because we barely have like scratched the surface of studying it and like putting the science into it, right?
Well, yeah, imagine this. There are no, there's only two, let's say, major university master's level programs, that even, and they're more medical marijuana programs than there are
Yeah.
endocannabinoid programs. And there's no PhD level program yet on the endocannabinoid system. So what does that mean? There's no research. There's no PhD. Research is being done, but it's being done kind of sideways and bench studies and things like that, but not real university studies, which is really what we want, because there's no PhDs to do them. And it's not taught at a PhD level yet. So, but back to kind of what you were saying, but the way that this system works, the way that we manage and feed this system is so important, because it sets a programming tone for what goes on inside of us. So let me kind of walk you through a little bit of this and a little bit of an example, and then I think we'll have a lot of places to go. But so the endocannabinoid system, contrary to popular belief, is not fed by marijuana. It's fed by dietary fats. And there's four major types of dietary fats: saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, omega-3, and omega-6 fats. Our bodies can kind of reclaim and make saturated fat. It's part of all of our structure. It's in our muscles and everything, just like it's in the muscles of a cow and what we see in steak and all that, right? So that is saturated fat, or that is fat, is more than saturated. Monounsaturated fat is also something that our bodies will make. Omega-3 and omega-6 fats are fats that don't our bodies can't make. They are essential.
Mental. Yeah.
Essential. We have to have them and we have to eat them every day. But here's the cool thing, and this is a crisis right now. So to your point, what's the genesis of most disease? And you're going to think this is crazy sauce, but I encourage you and everybody to kind of research this and ferret this out, because it's kind of the top level thing that we're doing to ourselves that sets a tone and environment for all disease and everything that happens to us. But if I feed you equal and omega-3 and omega-6 fats, and I just submitted a paper with the world expert on omega-3 and omega-6 fats, because I'm kind of the world expert on the omega and the endocannabinoid system, to the administration, because this is so important and we all need to be learning about this. Okay. But if I feed you equal amounts of omega-3 and omega-6 fats, that sets a real loose and dynamic situation in your immune system where you can deal with a lot of stuff really easily. If you have an insult, you're going to inflame a little, you're going to attack that insult, you're going to heal that area, and then you're going to deflame. And it's very nice and dynamic. And the best example of this, let's say you had a dust allergy. All right. And if you were eating equal amounts of omega-3, omega-6, I could drive you into a dust storm and you would be incredibly uncomfortable during the dust storm. But as soon as we got out of the dust storm, whoop, you'd return right back to normal very quickly and be exactly the way that you were before I drove you into the dust storm. But here's the kicker. Right now in our environment, we eat about 40-1 omega-6s over omega-3s. Okay. When that happens, now let me tell you how important this is. That is reflected in every single cell wall. Every single cell wall in your body is a direct reflection of your omega-3 and omega-6 intake. Okay. But when we do this, omega-6s are like fire. They're reactive. They're inflammatory. They're like fire, fire, fire. Omega-3s are like water. They're calming. They're healing. And so in balance, it's perfect. But right now, the way that we're eating, again, let's go back to the dust analogy. You're allergic to dust. You're eating now the way that all of us are eating. I can't drive you through a dust storm. I might kill you. Okay. You're going to be that explosively reactive and inflammatory. A dust mite is going to cause this incredible overreaction in your immune system, and you're going to get stuck in that reaction. And how many dust mites are you going to be exposed to every day? And how many little infections and all this stuff that just cause all these explosions? In what world do we need immunosuppressants to deal with immune things like cancer or like, COVID, right? That's insane. Only in this explosive inflammatory world, we got to calm stuff down so then you can deal with stuff. But this is all endocannabinoid system. Omega-3 and omega-6s are the master precursors for your endocannabinoid system. They build prostaglandins. Those prostaglandins cause inflammation or lack of inflammation. They also cause pain. So again, if you're eating a bunch of omega-6 over omega-3, you're going to be a lot more tweaky and sensitive to pain.
Just another reason why we need to have the conversation about the omega-3, omega-6 balance, right? Like this is like, this is why in my foundation's RX to Wellness membership program, Wellness Made Simple, like we put omega-3 in there and we test omega-3 indexing, right? We've had a podcast on the creator of omega-3 indexing because I've been saying forever, and I never really connected it to ECS. So thank you, because that's why, right? That's where it came from. It's like I knew you were going there. It's like 40-1. Like it's gonna, like we're so rich in omega-6. And I love that you balance it, because having the conversation, omega-6s aren't bad, but in the ratio we have them, they are, because they're pro-inflammatory. They're going to do that. They're going to be the hairstring trigger. And so I've always said omega-3 indexing is so important, because when you get the ratio right, and it's just that, it's like you could have the conversation all day long that omega-3s are good for you, but really it's because the ratio's off, right? And we're not eating it. So I love this because it just solidifies some content for me as well to, when you're going root cause, like here it is, it's right here, right now. So I love the fact that you're and this is let's segue this into the divorcing of marijuana and cannabis from the ECS because it hits those receptors, right? This is just like why opiates have been so good for pain because it's hitting the opiate receptors. We have these systems in our bodies and we have plants in nature there for us to affect these systems. It's this beautiful harmony, but it's not like the plant was designed so we can affect our system. It was like we have a system and these things have naturally progressed. So I love that we're having this conversation because I want to talk about your supplements and your innovation on on this whole process of affecting it in the positive light. So I love this segue of like omega-3, omega-3, omega-3 and why. Like this is why it's important. This is why we need to eat it. It's essential. You don't get it out of your diet. Our highly processed foods and all the crappy seed oils that are being highly processed brings us to 40 to 1. This is evident. And if you tested yourself without omega-3s in your body, you'll see it.
Yep.
This is why we don't need to test it, but every single time I test it, I get people to change
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
see it.
No, and I think that's one of the biggest, there's I won't name them because they bug me to death, but there's an MLM company that does that as part of their omega-3 supplement. They'll test and then they'll kind of allow you to retest. You have to pay for the test, that you can at least get a status and a baseline of where you are. And again, if you're more than 4 to 1, omega-6, and most people, it's really hard to get under 8 to 1, honestly.
Yeah.
Sure. And we should be at about 4 to 1. And it's because we just don't understand our diet. And we don't understand our inputs. And this is why we need to study the heck. The science here, though, is done, right? Dr. Artemis Thomopoulos, who's I just talked to yesterday, is my co-author on this paper, but she did the science on this back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, it's well established on these ratios and all that. So it's just now we need to take that science and really get it into the mainstream and really get people to understand, the criticality of this. And again, why is it not out there? Well, it's it's in some people's best interest, as you know, to keep you sick. And there's a whole, billion-dollar, jillion-dollar business around, treating symptoms rather than causes. And so this hasn't really made it, let's say, into awareness because of those reasons. It's a big top-knot thing that when we get right, we'll really start improving our health. We have so much upside in our health. That's the other cool thing about, this system. And as you study the endocannabinoid system, the other cool thing is you cannot study this system without then understanding diet, without then understanding kind of how we should interface with our environment, how important it is to have proper stuff in our environment, because it just all falls out of studying the system, which is cool.
I love it. And I just read because I've been doing a lot with longevity, and like this is just a big thing. People want to learn how to live not only longer but like better. Our tagline is live better, stay well. And so we're building out a longevity protocol based on simplicity and science, because everything I like to do is backed by science. But then something, of course, pops into my feed and they're studying omega-3 in longevity, right? And this is why it's like we're getting right to the thing. And it's like everybody's looking at NAD and metformin and all these crazy things going on. Like, what can I do? What can I do? And it's like, I keep having these conversations about simple, like nail omega-3, your magnesium, and your vitamin D. Like if you nailing those 3 things, you're probably going to be in a much better place.
Yeah.
And so that's why we start those 3 things with the supplements and labs in our foundations process before I go anywhere, before I do anything. That's what I'm doing. And
That's
so,
excellent. Yeah. That is
so that's what I love that I'm speaking to the world-renowned expert in the ECS model, and he's validating like why my intuition has always been in here, right? It's because the body knows, right? The body knows, and so we're working through that process. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that you might and you may already do this, but something else that you might kind of factor into your protocols is infection. then this is something that we're seeing, let's say in the people that we're seeing clinically, and I'm not a doctor, I can't, say any doctor words or anything. We just try to help people with the information that we have. But what we're seeing is infection like crazy. And so, again, if I'm disbalancing you omega 3, omega 6 heavy, your immune system is going to be super concerned with stuff that it shouldn't be concerned with. And it kind of leaves your gate open for hook round and pinworm, for H. pylori, for Epstein-Barr virus, for cytomegalovirus, for all these things that we're seeing in people. And when we get infected, again, if we're infected with something, to me, that's why we age. I mean, grandma doesn't die of a heart attack. That's what goes on her death certificate. But your heart just doesn't fail. God doesn't work that way. Hey, Chip, I think I'll have your heart fail today. It takes years and years and years of stress and abuse. So grandma dies of a 30-year hook round and pinworm infection, not a heart attack. And that's just, my thinking.
And we had talked about that. Thanks for reminding me, because we had talked about that prior to the show. And yes, because again, it's that upstream thing, like, in functional medicine, they always talk about it, but now there's a lot of this underpinning about like parasites and people having these things. And like, they've been there forever, but now it's because that immune dysregulation. And it's funny. I love, people that know me in this show, right? Like, I'm big pharma and big food. Like, they're doubling down on this stuff. It's like every single drug now has a MAB behind it, which means it's affecting the immune system. Instead of treating the master switches, we're looking at modulating that that highly reactive immune system. Instead of saying, well, why is it highly reactive? Every single drug is, and there's so many effects. Let's not call them side effects, because when you hear the drug commercial, it says, well, this might cause cancer and death because it's affecting the switches in a different way. And so I'm glad we're talking about this in that light.
Have you ever heard this term, cutting butter with a chainsaw? That's kind of what, and pharma has a place. Good Lord, if I get shot or run over, please take me to the hospital. And, acute and traumatic care are always over here and should always be over here, but not general health. It's cutting butter with a chainsaw. It's, again, how do you control high cholesterol? Fast, intermittent fast. You flip the same switches as a HMG CoA reductase inhibition is what we're after, and you do that with AMPK just by waiting 5 hours to eat.
Well, and these are the simple tools that have so much science into them, right? Like our metabolic reset program, the first thing we do is teach intermittent fasting, right? It's just because we are hunter gatherers. There's a reason for that. Like, there's a reason we evolved in the way that we evolved. Is like we weren't fed all the time, right? We weren't fed all this junk all the time, but we weren't fed all the time. We had to starve a little bit because the body has to, and it's actually super healthy. This is why we saunas and plunge pools and like everything is all in the specs of getting the body back to what it's supposed to do, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And so this is just another great reason why we should be doing the lifestyle. Yes, I have it on my website, like the RX evolution, acute care medicine. Medications are necessary, but that's because we've gotten so sick, we have to change the symptom. Because if we can't change the symptom, we're going to get worse. So yes, when I say it's a sick care system, it's not derogatory. It's just pharma wants to keep you less sick. But if they're not in the business of curing or healing, because they lose a customer, right? It's a business. We understand that. And you could plan whatever field you want or whatever, people that listen to this, I feel like they understand the system's failing them. And in an acute setting and this is why our mission is to deprescribe 10 million unnecessary medications. Yeah. We know we're overprescribing because it's in the data. We're filling more and more prescriptions and chronic diseases on the rise. There's a problem. So you and I are on the same page talking about these things. Chronic conditions managed with prescriptions is different than acute care. If I get hit by a bus, take me. We get this in my shamanic healer, right? My shamanic healing certification is like, if I get hit by a bus, take me to the ER. Don't take me to the shaman.
No.
Like,
Yeah, no, I'm right with you.
because I need to get fixed, right? And you got to put my parts together and make me not dead. But then I go to the shaman to figure out why I got hit by the bus in the first place. That's kind of how it works for me. And
Yeah, no, well said.
so for me, it's like that's what we're talking about. It's like you don't have a sickness to take, you don't have a Prozac deficiency. Like figure out why there's a problem with your depression and why exercise is better than Prozac for mild to moderate depression, right? We can't
There's
do this. That's the
yeah,
thing is like hopefully people are understanding like lifestyle medicine is actually the core. We've talked about this in many episodes. It's the core of health. It's not like an after effect.
right. If someone has, let's say, high cholesterol, right? It's about 95% that they're infected with something. Okay, and that's what's causing it. Cholesterol is the brick and mortar in the body, right? 40% of your brain
We
is
need it.
cholesterol.
We need it.
Yeah, anytime your cell needs to heal, what happens with LDL cholesterol is a cell needs to heal, and again, that could be from infection, it could be from trauma, it could be a bunch of different stuff. But if a cell needs to heal, it's going to whistle up, "Hey, I need some cholesterol," and the liver is going to deliver that in an LDL, chlomaricon, right? So it's going to bring that to the point of wherever it's needed in an LDL. So if your LDL is high, what does that logically mean? It just means cells are needing to be repaired. They're calling for more cholesterol, and it's most likely an infection. It could be some other things, but 95%, let's say you're infected with something. Same thing with high blood pressure. Again, blood is hydraulic fluid. The thinner, the healthier you are, the thinner your blood's going to be. The more infected you are with things, the thicker your blood is going to be, which increases the pressure of the hydraulic fluid, which increases your blood pressure and increases the strain on your heart. But again, it's a whopping indication of infection, both of those two things. And how many people in our society are on high blood pressure medication and freaking LDL, statins, right?
Everyone's on statins. Everyone's on a PPI, right? It's like,
Yep.
well, let's keep motoring down the symptom of what's going on. I always saw that in my stress talks too. It's like cortisol, like cholesterol is the building block for all your hormones.
Yeah.
So if you have high cholesterol, but you're not managing your stress, well, you're going to keep producing cholesterol because the body needs it. It needs to,
And
we
it's
got
going to all go. Yeah,
you're
it's just going
still
to all
running from the damn tiger every day, all day. Like
go.
70% of the patients, 70% of people are in fight or flight all the time. So let's move it to the other side and get to that forefront. So I'm glad you're bringing these things up in
And,
this way.
and there's a whole tree, from cholesterol, which is kind of this master molecule for all hormones and steroids. There's this whole breakdown in these trees that happen, and testosterone and estrogen are kind of way down here, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, if you're in fight or flight, you're going to be sucking all of that cholesterol right down your cortisol pathway, and you won't, it's a resource. It's like a bucket of water. You've only got so much water. So
Well,
good point.
that's it's cortisol steal or pregnenolone steal, however you want to call
Yep,
it, because
yep,
that's my first. Like I don't, I we do a lot here with like managing sex hormones, testosterone, estrogens, and things like that. But I always get up to the space of like, where's your cholesterol and where's your stress level? Because your body, right? This is it's gonna run from the tiger before it metabolizes the food before it has babies. Like it's a simple system of survival. So if we're not up at the top, we're not going to be able to manage the bottom. No matter how much we slather on you, it's just never going to be in balance. And that's why I think a lot of people that are in hormones and like in a lot of functional providers, like they're ignoring the upstream stuff when they're
yeah.
just putting on hormones. And every single one is like, how are you feeling? I feel like shit. And I was like, well, where's your stress level? I'm totally stressed. I'm like, well, let's deal with that before we go here. Right. And so
And the other thing,
it's the same thing. It's all root cause medicine, right?
back to blood pressure real quick. So what controls blood pressure in our body is something called aldosterone, right, which is a hormone, and it's a breakdown. I had a young lady in the other day, and she just looked like a face in a giant water balloon. Okay. And she had super high blood pressure, and it was very clear that she had an aldosterone issue. But why would she have an aldosterone issue? God is a perfect engineer. If I teach you how to intermittent fast, you should break down, cholesterol into aldosterone, and that should re-regulate, unless you're infected. And if you're infected, guess what the bugs like to do? They love to grab those enzymes. They love to grab those hormone enzymes, and they love to lock you down a cortisol pathway or another pathway where you might not make aldosterone and you might not be able to regulate your water and blood pressure and all that, like this young lady. So we had to kind of pipe around the problem, let's say, as you just said, with, pregnenolone and, iron and some things to get her boosted back up to be able to make aldosterone. But all of this falls out if you understand your master regulatory system. It's just a very easy thing to teach. It's really easy to teach you around this tree and teach you about hormones and teach you about your immune system and, teach you about all these other systems, as opposed to the way that, like, I know how you were taught in pharmacy school. And it was like, trying to teach somebody about, how a car works. Well, let's start with internal piston pressure. It's very important that if you don't maintain internal piston pressure, then the whole thing won't work. And we're going to talk about all this complicated stuff instead of really just talking about how the system works. Anyway, it's compartmentalized on purpose, I think. But
No, it is, and it's, I call it the ologist world, right? Like we have we incentivize it too. It's like if the surgeon that deals with the right pinky finger is going to get all the support in. No, there's nothing wrong with being specialized, but we're incentivizing it in our system. This is why, again, another part of the brokenness is our primary physicians and primary pharmacists, which are everywhere. There's 20,000 independent community pharmacies, and we're the first line of approach. We see patients 10 times more than the doctor every year, but we're not being utilized in these ways. We're being utilized to push the drugs and to, if something's wrong, go to the specialist. And it's like, well, deal with the tree trunk before you get out to the branches here.
well,
Um,
and even pharmacists have lost the, kind of drug responsibility, right? They're, anytime you go to Walgreens and pick up that prescription, you should have a pharmacist standing behind that prescription that says, this is safe for you. I know everything that you're taking. It's not going to cause any harm. It's not going to cause any effect. And boy, have we, we're a long way from that
Well, I mean,
anymore.
we've commoditized it to the point where, like, we've made that stance here to release that piece and say we're going to do the well care and we'll
Yeah.
do the love in the bottle still, but we're not going to do the pills because it's been so commoditized and it's not going to get better, right? Amazon's just going to drop it out of a drone and into your mouth in the next couple
Well,
years.
here's the
It's like
thing
we
that
need to
I
go
think.
back to that, right? We need to go
Yeah.
back to like the Hippocratic Oath and why we're here to help people, because we're not just here to dispense drugs. We're here to help people.
I'm an activist, right? And I've been an activist in the cannabis space. I wrote the law here in Oklahoma. I wrote the medical marijuana law, so I understand, let's say, how to make change and how to do things. And I also understand kind of trends and the way the wind's blowing. I mean, you can't really be a activist leader unless you are pretty good at judging the wind, let's say. And so what I see happening, and this is, why I'm writing papers with Dr. Simopoulos and sending him to administration. I see these walls beginning to break down. But here's the big thing. I think as soon as we allow natural products into the insurance system, so when I can, and again, they're going to have to rise to a certain level. They're going to have to be manufactured, USP or NSF or whatever. But there's going to have to be, stuff around what natural products would rise to the level of a drug. But as soon as natural products are in the insurance system and drug system, and, should turmeric be in the healthcare system? Yes. Should garlic be in the healthcare system? Yes. It's the best broad spectrum antibiotic on the planet. Of course it should be, right? When that starts happening, when insurance starts writing those checks for garlic and turmeric supplements, whop, the world will change. because now you have to be educated about them. Now I've got to teach you about them in school. Now I can, and I can't do that without teaching you about the endocannabinoid system.
No, I think another great reminder why I've used clinical nutrition for outcomes for so many years and why it's so difficult to get patients to use them, because it's the first question is, does my insurance pay for that? Does my insurance
Right.
pay for that? At least we get to the place now where if I recommend it and the doctor says yes, we can script it and we can run it through an FSA card or an HSA card. So we're getting
Yep.
closer to these spaces now. We're seeing like, you know, health tech and things being able to be used with FSA and HSA. But so we're in the process of that. But yes, then it's the whole, well, pharma's got all the money, so then they're going to control the process. And then Epidiolex is like $1,400 versus getting, a little bottle of
CBD.
CBD.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
No,
my pharmacy association, board of pharmacy here tells me it's not permissible to sell CBD over the counter in a pharmacy because Epidiolex is an FDA approved drug. And so you can't sell both, but you can go to the gas station to buy it, right? It's so backwards sometimes,
yeah.
but it's like,
As a manufacturer, so just as a manufacturer, and this happened several years ago, but this is the struggle, let's say, that manufacturers or people who are trying to, make these formulations that we think are very valuable. But we had the FDA come in and literally our inspector picked up, one of our tincture bottles and she said, "Is there CBD in this product?" And I said, "Yes, absolutely, there's CBD in this product." She said, "Do you know that we consider this a drug?" And I said, "Yes, I understand you consider." And so you're putting drugs in your dietary supplements. I understand you think that, but we're going to give you a warning letter. The FDA can't shut you down. That's not what they do, but they can absolutely make it horrible for you to do business. And they did that to us in our past, iteration. And not only us, this was right after the Arena Pharmaceutical deal closed. I don't know if you know about that, but Pfizer bought Arena Pharmaceutical, for one endocannabinoid drug, which they've shut down. As soon as that deal closed, you had the FDA go around and start shutting down all CBD manufacturers for this reason, the very reason that you state. So, it's those of us who are trying to do this are really doing this at risk. You're doing it at risk for your professional license. I'm doing it at risk, for my business and livelihood every day. But we're doing it because we know that it's right. We're doing it because we know that, God wants us to do it. And we know that we'll really help people with what we're doing. But, thank you for what you're doing, because I know the risk you're under if you're, selling CBDs.
well,
Your license.
yeah, we could probably have a whole episode on that, the risk management and the why, right? Like I've in it's even in in the psychedelic world, it's even there too, right? It's like nothing's
Yep.
FDA approved, but people are really true for that. I want to go in two different places because I think they're both important. Um, and I think we'll go down the path of the supplements first. What's interesting is I also, and whether it's the FDA or the Board of Pharmacy questioning CBD I also asked them, well, that there's an FDA approved omega-3, right? And they're like, yeah, it's called Loveza, right? And so I'm like, but I can sell omega-3 over the counter. And they're like, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this. And I'm like, well, if you have no precedent. So anyway, we could digress on that, but let's talk about TrueMedX, because you talked about manufacturing. I want to talk about how we can influence ECS naturally without having to, let's go to we're divorcing a little bit on the cannabis. It's got its place. We know that it's really powerful, and you should go guided if you're going through that from a medical perspective. But let's go to the ECS and how we naturally affect that. So let's talk about your genesis of TrueMedX and what's going on with that.
Sure. No, this will be fun. So you would expect, just thinking logically, right, that we have this master regulatory system, that environment would be the biggest impactor of this system, and diet would obviously be a way to drive it. So we've talked about that with omega-3, omega-6. Well, it turns out there's a lot more detail there and a lot finer, let's say, actions that you can really drill into the endocannabinoid system and make changes. And so, inflammation, let's say, is something that is absolutely, controlled by this omega 3, omega 6 balance, but also your immune system. And you can get in the middle of inflammation with, basically calming down CB1 neuroreceptors because they're the guys that are all tweaked out. So how do you do that? CBD is a good way to do that. There's also, turmeric is a good way to do that because of the curcumin, and turmeric is a kind of reverse agonist, let's say, of CB1. Still kind of unproven. It's a little bit goofy, but that's what we think. There's lots of things in nature, and there would be, that impact our master regulatory system. So as you understand the system and you understand nature, whoop. Now, the interesting thing, though, is, and I kind of had this, and what did I do? This was in 2016 or 2017. I wrote a patent around being able to engineer these things from nature into effectors, right? So things that would mitigate inflammation. I can't really make that claim because we haven't proved that out yet, but let's say, that was the intent, was to mitigate inflammation or to mitigate pain or to do things like that. And it turns out that you can engineer things from nature, and there's lots of things from nature you can engineer to have action at the endocannabinoid system to do that. And cannabis is a way to do that. It's kind of the, let's say, most complete plant, out there to do that. But if you understand nature and you understand the system and you kind of understand pharmacology, there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, one of the biggest effectors of the endocannabinoid system, other than dietary fats, which are absolutely the biggest effectors, drugs in the future will be based on omega 3 fatty acids. They'll be, analogs of omega 3 fatty acids and breakdowns of omega 3 fatty acids that we already make in our body. But black pepper, because of the beta caryophyllene in it, yeah, it's one of the strongest modulators of the endocannabinoid system in nature. Many things modulate the system. I had this really interesting thought experience as I was beginning to learn about this, and I was studying turmeric and curcumin, and again, it's unclear kind of what curcumin does, but it acts like a reverse agonist in the system. But I had the thought that, gee, would God be so cruel as to only allow my solution, turmeric, to be grown in India where I can't get to it, right? And so I have this thought that there has to be turmeric-like actions in natural products within 5 square miles of me, if God is just. And it turns out that's kind of true. I mean, I might need ginger and I might need a couple of things to build that turmeric action, but I can do it with stuff within a 5 square mile loop. So there's a lot of ways to impact this system. But again, you need a method, and that's kind of, what my patent is, if you will, to attack things. And so if you're looking at infection, let's say, there's, ways to calm down inflammation enough to, get your immune system to re-engage. But all of this is really just talking about, getting your body to do what it needs to do, right? How do we stimulate the body to kind of remember what it needs to do, or fight, or whatever? And it's all, natural healing is what we do. Yeah. But we just have a deep understanding of that. So.
And I think that's where I think some of these supplement companies get it wrong, maybe, or not, are on the right path, is like, you went to the place where, like, how do I affect the system and how do I modulate the body to do what it's supposed to do, right? That's it. We have that divine wisdom within all cells of our body, and I've been exploring that energetically and spiritually for a long time now, and I want to get into that with you. But I feel like that's what makes your formulations different than what's out there today, is you kind of have that centered approach to that.
Well, intentional, and they have, a patent behind them, which means that they have a lot of knowledge and, information, let's say, behind. It's not like we're just asking chat what would be the best thing for XYZ. We are doing a lot of intentional work, and we feel like our products, and some of our products are. Again, I can't really say this. I can't really say what products are, but let's just say some of the products are rising to the level of drugs. And as soon as I say that, I've got to now go file an IND with the FDA.
Yeah.
But we certainly have things that are, drug worthy, let's say. And that is our next steps will be to, and again, if we get funded, we'll do it quick. If we don't get funded, we'll do it on our own. But gather data, clinical data on everything that we're doing with diagnostic testing behind it and prove out basically these as drugs. And we'll get them in the drug system eventually. That obviously goes quicker, with help and
Yeah.
labs and all that stuff.
It's not cheap, guys. It's not cheap
Yeah.
to do these. And there's very little because it swings the other way. It's like, moving it patent and getting it there. Like, so how do people find your stuff right now? It's TrueMedX, like TrueMedX, right?
Right.
Like, buy them
True.
online? Are you distributing in different places now? Like, what's the best way for people to dive in on that stuff? Because it's really important that we show people where to get the right things.
Yeah. So TrueMedX, TrueMedX.com is where the supplements are. One of the things though that we suggest is, some kind of consult. Because right now we're all kind of stabbing in the dark with this stuff. And so we like to just, talk to people, maybe get a blood test, maybe get some idea of diagnostically where they're at. And that really helps me target and supplement. So if you just came and said I had high blood pressure, that might indicate, infection, that might indicate this aldosterone thing that, we talked about some. So it depends on kind of what's going on. But we have built, we have 40 something SKUs. We have kind of have an app for everything. I'm getting ready to come out with an ED formulation. I think it's going to be pretty good. And I'm the the core cause of most disease, and we talked about this earlier, kind of top function, or can you? Is there a place where all disease has a common? Let's say. And there is. I mean, it turns out in kind of how we produce energy and how we move electrons, there's a thing that we move electrons through, and this is not real well known, so apologies, but they're called iron sulfur clusters. And these guys get dysregulated. They're almost at the heart of every, if you look at cancer and, iron sulfur clusters, you're going to see they're dysregulated. If you look at autism, if you look at inflammation, if you look at any kind of disease, these guys are dysregulated. And there's a way to support them. And so we're going to come out with I don't know what we'll call it yet, cluster. I don't know what we'll call it, but I've been working on that pretty hard. And that'll be an important mitochondrial and kind of cellular horsepower thing that we come out up with, but it'll be endocannabinoid system oriented. Absolutely. So,
Well, there's another breadcrumb or seed around why we affect the energy systems in our body, because it's we're if we look at this is why I've dived fully into energy medicine, because we know we're energetic beings, we're light bodies. We're talking about this in the physical space and how we affect the energy body from the physical. But if we're working on the energy body, we can work on the emotional body, which in turn works into the physical body. They all interplay with each other. Um, you're an ordained minister. How does I want to talk to you about, you say God gave us the cures.
uh,
So I want to dive into this before we kind of set off into the sunset here, because we're talking about energy. We're talking about the master systems. We're talking about affecting signaling in the body, where we truly don't know the intelligence, where the intelligence comes from, right? There's an intelligence here that we're talking about. And I know you're highly spiritual. You're an ordained minister. um I call it God, universe, spirit, because it's Gus is how I say it. um and I'm highly spiritual in my own spiritual awakening, and how it interrelates with health and science. So talk to us a little bit about how you see the divine design showing up in human biology and the ECS system, because this is the
oh,
intersection of science and spirit, right?
yeah,
We
yeah.
always see them as polar opposites, but I believe it's like this.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely like this. And, in my mind, we're two things in this reality. So I'm an incarnated spirit and I'm driving this physical canister. how much of my beautiful, wonderful incarnated spirit can I pour into a diseased canister? And when you look at the Bible and some of the things that are taught in the Bible, a temple and having a pristine temple, I think is two-faced, right? It's talking about us and the inside of us, because again, if I can have this temple be more pristine, I can more be here in spirit, and that increases my power. That increases, let's say, the ability to turn this temple into more of a light type function. Now, back to the analogy of a symphony, okay? So inside of us, again, we work like this symphony, and if we really had this figured out, again, we'd be glowing with this music. We would be singing with this music. You could not stop the expression of us. I think that we're very unique things. If you look at the definition, and we're just taught all this crap, right? You're taught that you're a mammal. Are you a mammal? Well, you work like a mammal, but your dog can make vitamin D in Alaska and you can't. And that's a pretty fundamental difference between you and a mammal. You have a different relationship with the sun than most other things on earth do. And we have a very tight, intimate relationship with the sun. We likely nutrient ourselves a lot more from the sun than we think. So we nutrient ourselves with actually that, ultraviolet, if you will, energy. There's just so much there. That Walter Russell is a great guy to study if you're interested in kind of how frequency works and how frequency moves. That we have energy that comes to us from the sun. Let's call those hydrogen atoms. As those hydrogen atoms slow down, as that light slows down, they begin to precipitate. They precipitate into water. Everything is a hydrogen atom, right? You may have oxygen that has 8 protons, so it's just 8 hydrogen atoms, right, glued together. So everything is hydrogen. So everything begins to precipitate down, from light, let's say, to matter. But there is a very elegant, logical way that happens. Things move in 12 PowerPoints, let's say, to an octave, 7 notes to an octave, and things move in those ways. They don't move in a straight line. They move in PowerPoints. The same thing happens inside of you. And again, if you want hard science on this, Michael Levin at Tufts, awesome. Also, there's a lady named Irina Kosak that wrote this thing called the resonant recognition model of physics. And what it says is that you work both physically. So there's physical enzyme reactions and physical dockings of ligands and neuroreceptors and all this physicality to you. That's one end of the spectrum. Right. The other end of the spectrum is complete frequency, where all these things are happening in frequency, not physically. And again, we can operate either way, but for whatever reason, we're being kind of forced down this physical, lower energy, cheap, impulsive, easier to control, however you want to look at it, pathway.
Well, it's just, this is why energy medicine is the future of medicine, is because everything is energy, everything is frequency, everything is vibration, right? And we're experiencing the slowest form of that in matter, right? And this is why all the science is catching up to the mystical, right? It was like we're talking about God and spirit, but we're also talking about quantum physics and interrelationships between the grid and the matrix of the quantum universe, and how we're living multiple universes at the same time. And all of this is because we're expanding our knowledge outside of that physical space. And how do they interplay? That's why I say it's like my personal experience is because I've experienced all of it at the same time, like in different ways, with plant medicines and meditation and sound healing and all these things. It's all relevant in today's day. So that's why I'm excited. That's why I feel like we're in the golden age. Like we're getting out of the archaic space of just manipulating the body parts. Like we're getting there. We're in there right now. We get to play in these fields, which makes it so fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun place to be, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface on this stuff now. And it's like a whole nother world opened up for me at age 49, right? It was like, Oh my gosh, I went all the way down functional medicine and all the mechanisms of action of health and wellness. And it was all still just physical, moving into the emotional and understanding how the mind can work in this space and opening up my own consciousness and then getting into energy. It's just we're building all this model now in this is why I feel like it's the ancient wisdom side, it's the modern science side. It's not one or the other, it's and that's what creates true healing. So I just think we both answered our question of where the vision of the future of wellness and healthcare is going. So, as we wrap up, I think I could probably and will love to have more conversations with you because we could go on for another hour for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But if
Let's
you could leave the audience, the listeners, with one place of wisdom to reclaim their health today, what would it be?
Oh gosh, you work like a machine. You work like a beautiful, wonderful, godly machine, and you're programmable. You're programmable by your diet. So and again, the AI tools right now are really good at this. No nutritionalist is taught about the endocannabinoid system unless they're self-taught. So they don't have the information, let's say, that Josh and I have. So download a tool, something like Chat or something like that, but begin to ask it about diet and the importance of, hey, I'm, eating this stuff. Does it have the right balance of omega-3, omega-6 in it? How do I get balanced omega-3, omega-6? But start looking for information and empower yourself because nobody's going to come save us, right? Nobody's going to come save us. We have to save ourselves. We all have to save ourselves here.
I love that. And this is why we do what we do. This is why this, podcast and the wellness center and the things is it's all about self-empowerment, right? It's we're in the driver's seat. This is part of that system. So I'm so glad you brought that up because we've been trained or entrained to believe that that person with the coat is going to tell us what's wrong with us, tell us what we need to do. Yes, we're diagnosing and treating, we have labs, great. But we're in the driver's seat. When you're talking lifestyle medicine, nobody's going to do that for you, but you need a guide, right? And yes,
Right.
I think AI has got a tool here. We're training it to be complementary in our processes so we can help train and educate our patients more, so we can help be a guide along their journey to help kind of I always say this almost on every episode, like the world's best have coaches, but the coach doesn't play the game, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
we have to play the game of our own health journey and use the people around us to empower us with the education so we can make that informed, confident decision about our health and well-being. I want to give people options though. So you have a podcast,
Yep.
you have a community that talks more about this in depth. Let's talk to people of how they can find you and how they can follow these topics because they are so important.
Sure, sure. So if you want to, my podcasts are on every platform, but it's just Chip Talks Health is the name of the podcast. We do have a clinic. It's a physical, let's say, clinic where we do try to help people. And it's called neighborlywellness.com. You can find out more information about us. If you want to book an appointment or something with me, you can do that, at neighborlywellness.com. Now, this is something that we want to expand. We want to expand what we're doing, into other places. And so let's say if the idea of what we're doing is interesting to people, then we're looking for, people who want to open another, let's say, neighborly wellness, things like that. So, and also we're looking for, we have silos of care, you think of weight loss as a silo of care, diabetes as a silo of care. We have to be careful with what we say because we can't really make claims as where we're at now. But we're looking for places to put those. And so, if that's of interest to you, it's that might be interesting. And I'd love to have you on my podcast too. We'd have a great
I
time.
love
Yeah.
that because we're building our Beyond the Pills tribe too with our model of care and through our Stay Well Institute, which is our wellness center here. It's budding. It's like built. The way I feel about this is it is this collective, right? It's this
Yeah.
collective experience. We talked about that and now it's full circle. It's like the cells are collective, and when they're happy, they're moving in the right direction, just like the flock of birds, right? Well, this is where health and healing is going. So we can collaborate and use our zone of geniuses to help each other, because I feel the world needs healing and there's no competition. So I would love to collaborate with you more on that and help, because I'm teaching pharmacists nationwide too. Like, how can we bring this into their communities and have these little wellness hubs where we're doing this lifestyle training, we're getting to the root cause, and we're, like I said, this is the way to get people off making those medications they're taking unnecessary. Because when they're unnecessary, they don't need them. And how do you make them unnecessary? Well, these are the tools we're talking about. Let's make them unnecessary by the things we're doing, not by taking another thing. So thank you for this session, this beautiful, I've learned so much. So I'm excited to continue our relationship and our conversations, because getting to the root cause and affecting the way the body can heal itself, and the master regulatory systems, these are all so important in the world right now. And I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing, and you're paving the way for our future generations to move on this side of it before they go to that other side. So Chip, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. I really appreciate you having me, and can't wait to do it again.
This is going to be great. That's a wrap, guys. We could go on forever, but this one, I hope this gave us value on where we can go and doing the things we can do, and empowering ourselves to do the best things to heal ourselves. So until next time, stay well. Thanks for joining me today on Beyond the Pills. If our mission to deprescribe 10 million unnecessary medications resonates with you, share this episode, subscribe, and leave a review. Whether you're a practitioner or someone ready to reclaim your health, visit rx2wellness.com for free resources to begin your journey. Together, let's go beyond the pills and co-create a world of vibrant health and true healing. Until next time, live better and stay well.